I'll do a brief introduction, read your
Great.
bios.
And then we'll go right into you reading, right? Yeah.
Hi, everyone. I'm Terrence Arjun. I'm the manager of 192 Books, and thank you to Joan Larkin and Eileen Myles for having the launch of Old Stranger at our bookstore by Alice James Books. And I'm just going to read their bios, and then Joan's going to read, and there'll be a conversation and a Q&A. Joan Larkin is the author of 5 previous poetry collections, including Blue Hanuman and My Body, New and Selected Poems. She has received the Audre Lorde Award, the Lambda Literary Award. She co-founded Out and Out Books during the 1970s feminist literary explosion, co-edited 4 anthologies, including gay and lesbian poetry in our time, and has been a lifelong teacher. Larkin has been awarded fellowships from the National Endowment for the Arts, the New York Foundation for the Arts, the Academy of American Poets, and the Massachusetts Cultural Council. She received the 2011 Shelley Memorial Award from the Poetry Society of America. Eileen Myles is a poet, novelist, and art journalist whose practice of vernacular first-person writing has made them one of the most recognized writers of their generation. Pathetic Literature, which they edited, came out in the fall of 22. Their newest collection of poems, A Working Life, is out now. Their fiction includes Chelsea Girls, which just won France's Inroctables Prize for the foreign novel, Cool for You, Inferno, and Afterglow. Writing on art was gathered in the volume The Importance of Being Iceland, and books of poetry include Evolution and I Must Be Living Twice, New and Selected Poems. Joan and Eileen are heroes in my heart, and to keep it short, I'll quote Eileen, "My twisted tongue lets go and I rise like smoke."
That's Joan.
I quoted Joan, sorry.
I was like, wait a second.
Anyway, welcome, Joan.
No.
Thanks so much, Terrence, and I would be glad to be mistaken for Eileen anytime. That's not going to happen, though. Actually, what's going to happen is that I'm going to start by reading 2 poems, then we're going to have some conversation, and then I'll come back and read a whole bunch more poems. And let me not forget to say thank you to everybody at 192 Books for they really have their act together here. I'm very impressed. Can you all hear me? Am I talking into the mic? Okay, good. And thank you all so much for coming tonight. It means so much to me. And it's really humbling knowing that there are so many wonderful writers and poets sitting in those chairs. My father's tie rack. Back of the door to his dark closet, eye height, with clever steel pegs I could flip both ways, a row of pendulums, of tongues, words wordless, witnesses waiting to be sworn, the town secret, a silk body, a man's plenty, a wild ache, a knot, one painted with gold mums, one with blood leaves on mud, Vishnu's skin, 20 shades of sky, white flag iris, slick sheen of a green-black snake. Which one went with him into the hole? Somewhere else, his belts. The first line of this poem, Chain of Events, includes being and nothingness, not as themselves, but as the title of Sartre's famous work. And there are also some artifacts of the 1950s, which was when I was growing up, like circle pins and Peter Pan collars and page boys in it. But you're all probably much too young to remember those horrors. Okay. Chain of events. It started with being and nothingness and hiding a pack of Luckies in my school bag, tucking a matchbook in front without tearing the cellophane. I risked taking the streetcar downtown late at night. Did they never hear me? And basked in the gleam of Herb Pomeroy's band and the tang of underage vodka in orange juice. I quit sleeping in metal curlers, told everyone I was an existentialist, though I kept wearing my Peter Pan collar and gold tone circle pin almost right up to the night of the abortion. I gave up on the straggly page boy. I think that was part of what Mother meant when she screamed, "Where did I go wrong?" I'm not sure what to do with this. Okay, thanks. Hi, Eileen.
Hey, hello, Joan. This should be really easy because we're really good friends and we've known each other for years. So let's see what happens, right? So I wanted to start with a really dumb, broad question. Kind of not pretending I don't know you, but it just seemed like. Oh, I guess also I sort of assumed like that maybe everybody in the room, there were lots of poets in here or writers, but maybe not, you know. And so there's a way in which, for me, it's just always interesting to think about, like the version of a thought that is, you know, includes all the versions and stuff. So it's like for, you know, to talk about poetry for poets and non-poets in a way. So here's the dumb question. So why do you think you're a poet instead of a pianist or a singer or a painter or any of the things you may have loved in your life? Like, how did this happen?
Great question. Well, I was a poem writing child. My brother had charge of the piano. I took piano lessons, but I didn't practice. I had a book that I was reading that was, you know, sitting on the, and I think in another life, I would love to be a painter because everybody knows they have much more pleasure than we do with their materials. But, you know, it could have been almost anything, but I really love the making and the made thing. And I don't know, why poetry? I mean, I had the desire to make something beautiful and truthful, and that has persisted, you know, truthful, especially now in this time of lies and ugliness, you know, and so I don't think I've answered your question, but that's.
Oh, I think you totally did. Yeah. But what about, okay, so did anybody ever say you really ought to be a poet? I mean, so you were kind of, you know, writing poems, but wait, I know what you should do with your life.
Well, I had one brother, 8 years older than I, and he always encouraged me to write. It wasn't specifically poetry. In fact, he said, "What, you're still reading that one again?" There was a horrible, you know, I was about 8 or 9, rhymed quatrains about some fictional character called, I know it's too embarrassing. I can't even say what it is. Fortunately, my mother didn't save that with all the other precious objects of my childhood. But I got plenty of encouragement to write, and I was given beautiful books, you know, and read to, and the sound of my mother's voice reading to me was an encouragement in a way in itself. So yeah, I was encouraged, but in a funny way. I mean, I remember my father saying, "Well, maybe someday you'll get published in the Saturday Evening Post." You know, they had these.
That's class.
1950s, yeah, class.
Since you mentioned your mother, I think about this too. Sometimes you know, like, there are people who are doctors, and so they come from a family of doctors. and there are people who are lawyers and so on. And I've often, and part of it is a class, I have a little chip on my shoulder, like I thought for years I was given nothing, like I wasn't, there was no family business. But lately I've changed my mind about that and understood that, like, my dad was a mailman, and we got all these magazines, tons and tons of magazines into the house. And my mother was an amazing reader, and so I think, you touched on some of that, but I also happen to know that your father was the manager of a movie theater. So how much of that kind of atmosphere of what was in the house and what you grew up around do you think is what we're hearing?
Oh, I'm so glad you asked that, because I too have really come to a different kind of appreciation. They give us so much, no matter how much they also screw us up. And yeah, I'm not related to Philip Larkin, but of course I like that famous line. They fuck you up, your mom and dad. They were readers. Reader's Digest condensed books, the encyclopedia, Life magazine, Look magazine. My first encounter with Picasso was my brother tearing a page out of some special that Life magazine did on Picasso and tacking it on the wall. But besides that, my maternal grandmother lived with us. So I heard a lot of Yiddish spoken in the house. And my father had a beautiful voice, and my mother did too. And as far as I was concerned, they were the most glamorous people in the universe. I mean, I would beg my mother to smoke a cigarette. I loved watching the way she held it between her fingers. Mm-hmm. And so I don't know, what does that have to do with it? I mean, I heard this sort of guttural language, and then my father, who was a Southie from Boston, was very direct, clipped, telling it like it is. And so those streams of language really have stayed with me, and I still feel like I'm channeling them.
Yeah, I totally feel that about your work. The poem, one of the two poems you just read, which was my father's tie rack, is sort of astonishing, I think. For one thing, because you do this amazing description of his ties. I mean, it's just like they're like little bits of art writing, and that was childhood, right? It was just like we looked at all this iconic stuff in the house for hours, for days. You'd be sick in bed, and the tie rack would be there, and you'd be like hallucinating. I mean, and I do think there's something quietly hallucinogenic as well as filmic about all your poems, and so there's that kind of being with the what's there and kind of tripping out on it. But the thing that's intense about that poem, and I guess I want to talk about the ends of poems in a way, because you're like a master, and there's something very signature. I mean, I think every poet who's interesting knows how to end a poem in a very particular way, and every poet who isn't so good does not know how to get out of a poem. And you're like going along, and you're like, yeah, and suddenly it's like, and you were like, they just kind of walked out on you, and you're like, what the fuck? You had me by all my, senses and genitals and thoughts and everything. The whole thing is, and then suddenly they don't. And I think there's one thing you do, which is in the one, it's like, the end of it, it's like your white flag iris, slick sheen of a green black snake. Which one went with him into the hole? Which is a terrifying line. Which one went with him into the hole? It was like that, the transition from Dad's ties to him being a body going into, and then you do the weirder thing, which is the last line. And this is the thing that you do is so interesting, is like the last line is like a paragraph unto itself. You go, somewhere else, his belts. And I was like, what? So that it's like, I feel like it's part of the angst of growing up in a family. Like we use it all, what you were just saying earlier. We use every bit of it, including the way we shut down and stuff. So just when you said the most incredible thing about him going into a hole, and you go, somewhere else, his belts. Or you just change the subject, and yet it's categorical. And so it fits. And then we're out of the poem. And I was like, how did you just do that? Would you like to talk about
I have absolutely no idea. I mean,
do you know what I'm
I
talking about?
do know
though?
what you're talking
Yeah.
about. And whenever I read that line, I wonder if people are also hearing a kind of violent understory to the belts. But it's not necessary that you go there. And, but I don't know, it's really tricky because I guess I was brought up on Shakespeare's sonnets. So, there's that, and also, there have been periods when I've written much more expansive poems, and those are really hard to end. I think, like a litany. Where do you stop?
Yeah.
But
so how do you get out of it?
So
we keep going.
But
you.
No, that's all right. We're both thinking this through. I think that I've been writing mostly shorter for a long time now. And I think part of it is that the anxiety of writing is so terrible that I want to get off the page, and I want to get out, but the other thing is that I've learned, and I do tell myself this when I'm writing, it's not enough to be descriptive. It's not enough to tell a little story. This isn't an essay. You've got to surprise yourself and be surprised by what else wants to come into the poem. Mm-hmm. Believe me, when I started to write that poem, I had no idea what the penultimate line, let alone the last line, was going to be. And that's part of the immense pleasure of writing, is mm-hmm. that letting the poem take you someplace you didn't know you were going. Well, this is maybe another subject. I don't know.
Go ahead.
But I love the way, the way the Shakespeare sonnets or other Shakespearean sonnets just end with that terse exit. But I'm also very conscious of not wanting to sum up or give you a little flower at the end, or, so I don't know. Sometimes it's in revision. I wish I had brought with me. I actually have started writing again. There's always this trough after a book. What's a poem? How do you do that?
Right.
And it was this time, it was very conscious and deliberate. The thing of wanting to make a turn at the end of the poem. That's the best I can do with this question for the moment.
That was incredible.
Okay.
What about the poem, the big poem, which is the title of the book? And I love when you told me this was the book is called Old Stranger, which I think is such a crazy, brave, kind of dirty, scary, creepy. Like it's sort of like it's like you're a woman in your 80s, right? And it's just sort of like, so you already live with as one moves through life and you age, you already live with the sense of there being a perception of you, and you are in that perception and you're living in it. And with that, so it's sort of like you almost don't want to tip the boat or give them too much. So it's like using the word old in the title of your book, I think is kind of wild. And then stranger too, because it's sort of like, in a way, one becomes more particular as they live, but also one becomes more general, So there's a way in which the title thinks, it's like, oh, Old Stranger equals Joan Larkin, and like, I feel like part of what I think is so cool about is that you took the risk of that association, and just put it on the outside of your book where somebody may or may not read the book, and it's just like, it's very, and plus, of course, the amazing Paula Modersohn-Becker painting on it, which is so amazing. But so I guess, is there a question in here? Also, what's, of course, when you read the book, and I almost don't want to, it's like the punchline, the poem that has that title is something else entirely too. So I feel like you're fucking with us in so many ways, and just taking a real risk with being, and it just like, it jostles, it shucks off femininity and with abandon. So tell me how it felt about picking the title and why you went for it and what it feels like to you.
You know, until I heard you say this about my own age being implied in that title, that was never in my mind at all. But I thank you for that, because
That's
you
so
know,
good.
I mean, this is a book of I hope my greater maturity. I mean, and I feel like I'm still going here, and still, I mean, everything is an old stranger, you know, because in a way, because certain layers have been lifted. You know, I don't have to be, I'm still writing about the family, but I don't have to be angry at them anymore, because, and you know, now I have compassion for them and gratitude towards them, among other feelings. But but you know, these layers come off, you know, as time passes. When I really don't remember. I have the feeling that the title of that poem came to me after I wrote the poem, or wait, it's in the first line of the poem, isn't it?
I don't remember.
I don't remember. You know,
we don't know.
Our memories. Eileen is also much younger than I am, but you know, moving on.
Yeah.
So, but I've been really baffled, amused, frustrated by all of the different things that people who write these little things about, not the blurbs on the book, which I'm very grateful for, but, you know, I don't know who wrote, somebody who works for the publisher wrote something, I think, for Amazon, and I keep seeing these interpretations of what the old stranger is and these encounters, and, you know, I don't relate to them at all. I don't even understand them, these descriptions. So I don't know. I'm not afraid of saying what the old stranger is, because it's right on the back of it's right in this blurb that you wrote.
Oh, okay. So you can say it.
To discover the old stranger is a knife. I have this fabulous old stained carbon steel knife, and you can sharpen them, you know, to a razor edge, and I use it every single day, you know, but I thought I had lost it. Anyway, blah, blah, blah. I'm giving you a prose version of the poem, so I won't do that.
It's a knife.
It's a knife, but it's a lot of other things too.
Yeah.
I mean, you do whatever you want with it.
Yeah. But I love that people, I think that's so predictable. People would riff. It's a title people would riff on and impose shit on it. But I love that. That's so great that it didn't even, it's like, I don't know if you've seen the Kristen Stewart movie, the Love Lies Bleeding.
I haven't
It's
seen
really
it.
great. It's so great. And this one guy I know who's very smart, hated it passionately. And part of what he hated is, it's like there's an incident in it in which these two women they kill a man, and they throw his car into this big, you know, like the Grand Canyon. It like throws it all. And he was like, that was so vaginal. This guy who hated. I was like, what? He said, it's so obvious. Anybody would like knocked over the head with the symbolism of that. And I was just like, did you think that? No, nobody I know think, you know, and it was this kind of.
And even if it were true, hello, something wrong with the vagina?
Right.
I mean,
Obviously, there was something wrong with the vagina. I think that was the problem.
yeah.
So, okay, was there a place you wanted to go immediately? Because there's there's a lot of dead in here, you know, this people, I mean, it's just like, I think one of the things about living for a long time is that people start to go, right? And it's sort of like, and so, but how they get reflected in the poems is so exciting. Like a significant person will be like tinkling on the keys at one moment, and later you're in the kind of the flash and the ignominy of their death, you know. And it's sort of like, and it's all there. And I feel like somehow I feel like every book is different. Like you mentioned your last book, and it was like her last book, Blue Hanneman, was that the last? Was like little short poems and really compressed and abstract and kind of. I mean, I love they're great, but it's such a different book from this book, you know. And it seems to me that every book is different. Like what's happened, and I wonder what's happened. Like what's your sense of what's happening in here, and how does that feel? Because I know I've been reading your work for years, and it's sort of like it's always the same body, the same intelligence, more knowledge, more experience doing a different dance. But so, what did you feel like was happening here?
You know, I'm always instructed by, aside from what I just said earlier, sorry, I shouldn't have been riffing on. I'm suddenly aware that this is being recorded, and I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings, because Alice James has been fantastic to me, and maybe it wasn't them that wrote the Amazon description, but anyway, I don't know what I have until it's done, and I had a funny relationship with the published book, after turning in the manuscript and going through some edits and then the whole proofreading process. I read it from beginning to end several times, and I kept thinking, oh my God, that's what I'm thinking. Oh, that's what this is about. Uh-huh. It was like the book was the old stranger, I suddenly discovered that I had written, you say lots of death, but there's lots of female in it, all kinds of stuff about living in a woman's body, from a woman beggar to my grandmother looking at me through the bathroom mirror, or me looking at myself as my grandmother. And of course, we're always these days talking about what that means, being a woman. So I don't know. I don't know what I'm doing until after I've done it. I'm sorry, I can't say more.
Did it feel different though when it was going on? Because you weren't, like when you say those short ones, you just want to get the hell out of the poem. You didn't say that exactly, but, and these don't feel that way. These feel somehow more meditative and slower, and I'm not trying.
I'm really glad to hear that. I just
and rich, just in a whole other sensorial kind of way. It's pretty intense.
Well, I don't really know the answer. I'm just going to guess that that there is more freedom in a way, not having to write the trauma anymore. Some of the poems revisit the same scene. Of course, the abortion that's haunted my whole life is in there. It was because it was illegal and other things that made it traumatic. But I sort of feel like I have a more almost sometimes humorous distance from some of that experience. I can mine it for, let me try to finish the sentence. There's a poem that I wasn't planning to read that opens the book, and it's about based on a memory of being in Jordan's basement with my mother looking into a three-way mirror while she's trying to figure out whether she can pinch find enough seam allowance to get it to fit me. And then the poem went to some other places. But I feel like what I noticed rereading it long after writing it was that my mother had some spunk, and that she, aside from wanting to clean me up and make me presentable for the 1940s and 50s, she had skills, and there's a lot of contradiction in there. After letting your daughter know that she's too fat for the clothes that you want to buy, she consoles you by taking you out to Brigham's for a hot fudge sundae. So, I don't know. I'm just kind of interested in what I'm discovering there.
Mm-hmm. I want to make one comment and then one more quick question, and then I think it's time for you to read, and then we will have a little Q&A at the end if you guys want to jump in. But the poem you were talking about, it's called Girls Department, and it's, this whole litany of ways that she's dealing with your body, and then you have a treat, and then it just ends in a green tulle gown mother grabbed from a bin. She had an eye for a bug, and she took up the hem. And it was just like that funny little rhyme that just ends the poem in a little pinch is just like what your mother was doing. It's another moment where it's sort of like you've absolutely lifted something from the family with the kind of economy and a clip and a kind of tough female gesture, and just like snap, and I'm out of here, and that is very beautiful.
Thank you for that. Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
You were still.
I'm on to the next question, which is that. And I just wanted to say, you do great smiles. There's a kind of a weird little smile, like your brother makes a kind of a baby smile, and you're kind of worried about him, like you've never seen this late in his life, and you've never seen this smile before, and was like, uh-oh. And then there's somebody who's kind of a healer, and the last line is, it's so beautiful. I lived for his sudden smile, and I do think that's part of what, film is great, but I think, and so is all of literature, but I think there's a way in which poetry nails something that's really swift. And it seems like the gesture that most reminds me of that is a smile. It's like, how do you register a smile, But that is such a moment, and you're kind of a master at that kind of quick thing. Do you have any? I don't know if it's not a question. It's just like love how you do that, Joan.
Yeah, thank you so much, Eileen. I will only say that hearing you read my mother's line in that first poem was thrilling for me because she had the same accent that you do,
I knew it was happening while I was doing it. I thought, okay, I stepped into this.
Boston, I don't know how somehow it left me without, I wasn't trying not to have it, but
yeah,
occasionally it creeps in, but
Yeah, I was very deliberate. I meant to keep it, so I did. I think it's time for more poems from you.
Okie doke. Love to read some more poems.
And we're going to move this up, and yeah. Thank you, Terrence.
We might not have a lot of Q&A time at the end, but
a few
okay.
Burning questions. We were with you.
Righty tighty, lefty loose. Okay.
Also, we started 5 minutes late, so don't worry about time.
I think I need to lower this a little bit. So how is this you can hear me okay? Okay, so is there anything you need to know about this poem? Mozart's songbook. And the song that's mentioned in the poem is a song that Mozart set a poem by Goethe that's about a little violet in a meadow and who's trampled and dies happy because the person who tramples him is this shepherdess who he's, really in love with. Anyway, that doesn't explain the poem, but I thought you might like to know the reference. Mozart's songbook. Outside on Fremont Ave, black snow, and no such thing as a white wig or a love-struck violet who sings his heart out. My lungs ached, huge with breath and the harsh sweetness of strange words. Veilchen, Mädchen. My brother spoke them to show how my tongue was a gate that could open secrets. He pressed keys part way to draw softest sounds from the upright, and what he loved, I loved. That was my whole faith then. Here's one of the smiles that Eileen quoted. Of course, this is absolutely autobiographically true. I did meet Chekhov. It's called With Chekhov. Dropper filled, he tilted his face to one side. My mouth stood open, baby bird waiting, but he put the dropper into my hand. I turned to avoid his eyes, lifted my tongue, exposed the thin membrane, squeezed the bulb. Slow, thick taste of oil and herbs out of some earth-dark furrow. No remedy for what killed him young. Don't swallow. I closed my eyes, let it seep into my blood. I lived for his sudden smile. This is called The Disappearance. It's another one that you referred to, Eileen, and it mentions Heap, that's Uriah Heep, and Tulkinghorn, another Dickens character, a lawyer in Bleak House. I think Uriah Heep is in David Copperfield, right? Anyway, I think that's everything. The Disappearance. Oh no, there's something else I want to tell you. I'm sorry, I'm really indulging in some memoir here. My late brother, Donald Moffat, was a science fiction novelist. And the last line of the poem includes the phrase black hole, in this case to refer to a mouth. And I just have been longing to tell people my secret reason for including that in the poem. Okay, so now you all know. The Disappearance. Twice Donald did something with his mouth I hadn't seen before. Old baby grin. His eyes locked on mine as the joke lawyer ran down ifs, if nots, we hope nots, billable. Which Dickens he was, I don't know, Heap or Tulkinghorn, or nothing more vile than flat eyes and a tight tie. Donald was mute, his mouth making the strange smile as he walked his stick down a steep street. Gin on an empty stomach, and he was out, mechanically shoveling in haddock. 3 times I asked, "Are you okay? Can you hear me?" And his hand poked fries into his mouth. Speechless black hole, I wish were fiction. Gilmore Road. When you fell in wet snow downhill from where your car balanced all night, one wheel hanging over nothing, wind hissing secrets in the pines, your mind still making words. So this is how it happens. No one heard your sigh or saw your ghost rise from the soaked husk of you. Wind hissed as they gathered you in, shouldered you carefully onto their truck, never having heard your music, ignorant as I of your new address. How are we doing? I guess I want to read one more that my brother isn't mentioned in this poem, but his piano is. I'm sorry. This is called No One Wants Them. It stood in the half-emptied parlor, heavy-footed, 700 pounds, old dark body, streaked where claws had sharpened against its side. Dust wheeled in a downdraft. The auctioneer was saying he couldn't give it away. No one wants them, filling his van with cracked things. Hard to get any value out of this house as he slid brass bed rails behind a slotted plate stand. I kept my mouth shut. He couldn't give a shit for the speech of angels. All it needed was new felt for the hammers. Someone, a kid, could learn on it, or the nursing home, tall pines. I cleaned ivory keys, offered free delivery. The born-again teacher wanted it for her son, whey-faced and mute in his father's grasp, while she tried some chords. We're sorry. The tuner put on his black cap after 5 minutes. The keys were plastic. Tuning could snap old wires, etc. I made the phone call then, and a kind man came with his rope and harness. I paid him to take it in his truck to sink to earth in the Camden dump. That was August. It will rot in winter. This poem is called A Father, and it's not about my father. It's about someone I met in Edinburgh, Scotland, in one of those cult meetings that I go to. Anonymous cult meetings. Okay. A father who'd put down the drink, decades of shouting, coiled and quiet, sat forward in his folding chair. What should he do about the son who wouldn't speak, who posted, "I wish he were dead"? I offered one of our bromides, and he stared, twisting fingers and lips. Where was the angel to lift him by the hair as he twisted in the vernal current? If I have wings, they're dog's wings. My old body, a dog's, floating over the cold eye. That's called powerlessness. And speaking of which, the angel lifting, that wasn't there to lift him by the hair, that line I'm indebted to the late Tim Dugos for. It's in his poem G9, and if you don't know his work, get it. Well, am I going to get to the end of this? Probably not.
End of the list? Why not? Yeah.
Well, oh, I think we're
Still
good.
some time.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, I'd like to read this one. It has a lot of hyphens in the title. 3-inch Day of the Dead musician. So he's not a dead musician, he's a Day of the Dead musician, just to clear that up. No shoes, no shirt, flaked ribs and spine, a threadbare tux. You grip your wire bow, stroke air, bone fiddle lost somewhere you stood propped. Grin unglued, you died a second time. Bits of a man no glue can fix. Ghost bones, ghost hat aslant, small inarticulate shadow on my desk. What are you that I mend not nor forget? I'm going to skip a few. Okay. Well, still writing about the body, and in this case, a memory of a particular cramping pain that that maybe some people will relate to. All at once, I bent double. Sounds came out of me. No way to stop the dark flood soaking into the passenger seat. More blood than a period, and too late. My wax white bridal dress, your friend's cello in the echoey chapel, already behind us. Parents receding like the road in our rearview mirror. My wet skirt stuck to the seat. That breathtaking fist of pain when the thickened wall I couldn't see shed its unbreathing ball of cells as if it had made a decision, something I shrank from in my somnambulist life, unless we count the times I've cut and run. I still see you speechless behind the wheel, jaw clenched as you swerve toward the lit Esso station, last chance for a long stretch of miles. Were Esso stations still in the US in the 60s?
Maybe.
Were they? Okay, now I think they're just in Canada. But, you know, not exactly a trade secret, but sometimes the sound of a word or the length of it or whatever works better for the music of the poem. I mean, it might have been a Texaco station that would never have done. Okay, a few more. Where is it? Yeah, there's a lot of surus still in some of these poems. But sometimes writing helps. Banjo, dulcimer, fiddle. Face resting in my palm, I stretched out long on the green lawn, listening. Not listening so much as loving how air shivered and sorrow was a tune, a light index finger downstroke, a sly joke, a note that repeated. My mind twanged with it. Grass trembled and shone. Banjo, dulcimer, fiddle, singing my story. Hush, listen, this song has 1,000 verses. I went to a college that the Seegers constantly visited and, you know, sang folk songs to us. And it was, you know, the late 50s. Okay, maybe 2 more. Fanny praised God, Aleph by Aleph, on the one page of her one book, signed her citizenship with X, pressed wells into dough with the heel of her hand, oil and salt her elements, well of onions her bread signature. She herself a well, 9 bodies from one, stood into her 70s, Oxfords, elastic stockings, satiny girdle to hold flesh in place. Just now, I saw her in my mirror, worn teeth and claws, old country eyes. Or did some stranger look at me with mercy, her wind-bent beach chair planted in rocks? Hold that applause. I'm going to read one more poem. Okay. Speaking of old age, there's a cane in this poem, which I no longer need to use, but it really, it was there. Anyway, that's not even the point. Or maybe it is. White pine. Walking to the studio, cane printing the dirt, I see you rising from a thicket, ragged ferns at your foot, deep grooves in your bark, around you, a cloud of needles. High on your trunk, 2 moons like scars of sheared off breasts where the chainsaw whined and sap oozed from the wound. Below them, a dark, articulate slit, dead and living in one body. Your cones, open in warm air, give winged seeds to the wind, enough for a forest. Death poem, wait. Joan, keep walking. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. So what do you think, you guys? Huh. Encore.
Oh. Thanks so much. I could really feel you listening. Does somebody have a hand up? No? Oh, Jimmy.
Hi, Joe. At the very beginning of your speak, you said, I ran around telling everybody I was an existentialist, and I really sort of connected with that because in the 50s, we sort of all did. But what that presupposed a mood. I mean, that supposed a mood and the kind of whether we an adapted way of looking at life. A kind of a not necessarily grim, but according to the philosophy itself, the dictum, the fact that existence after, that you don't define something, first you do it, and then it comes out. That connected to me with what you were saying about the poem. Now, what I thought was, well, what she's talking about is making a poem that somehow becomes its own person, right? And starts to talk back to her,
Huh.
And it says, this is the way. This is what comes next. Come on, just listen to me. And that's what your poetry is so beautiful because it's so spontaneous. You don't know what's coming next. It's not predictable, line to line. You get the sense of what's going on from the title, but then it's almost like a pinball machine. It's just absolutely, and you get, wow, what I was doing was counting, what I was doing the prosody as much as my ear could do it. And of course, it's pretty perfect. It's just fine. And it's yours. So I just wondered about when you were a moody kid, which you were, that was existentialist thing, everybody running around. I don't mean the 50s beats at all. Now, forget that. But I mean the real poets of what you read and what you listened to in the 50s or when you were growing up, radio, anything like that.
Well, thank you so much for that. I don't think I even understood. I might have been able to spout a couple of sentences about and I did read some Sartre, and I probably was emulating another classmate who was reading Sartre. I think that for me, the place that had in my life was I was desperate for a label. I was looking for a way to justify my existence. Books were salvation. Being able to call myself something, and it was to call myself something that wouldn't have been something my parents would connect with, was just terribly important. And and how do you deal with criminal teenage sexuality? Well, you feel entitled to be free to be who you are. And of course, Sartre. And then, I did read Simone de Beauvoir when I was in high school. That was my first encounter with feminism. And I underlined every sentence in the book, and then forgot it all because I, wanted the validation that my parents wanted from me, which was, marriage and all that shit. I don't know. That helps. Anybody else? Tom Carey.
So I'm thinking of this thing that James Schuyler said about when a poem just sort of happens, and then he said, the rest of it is just filler, which was this like the other 23 hours of the day, right?
Oh,
is filler.
Yeah, the rest of your life. Yeah.
Right, the rest of life is filler, right? And but I don't get that sense from your. I do get it from his, like the way, but I don't get that sense from your poems. And I'm thinking of there's a book that they didn't mention it. It's your book that begins. It's called Cold
River.
Cold River. This is the book I know best of yours. Cold River, and there's a lot of death in that, and I think maybe that's why. Maybe the rest of life is not filler for you because there's so much dying, and I don't mean that in a pejorative, any kind of pejorative. There's just a lot of dying. There's a lot of dying in my life, and I have no. That's not a question, but anyway.
She has
Well,
answer.
I thank you so much for, that's just my favorite book. And my friend John Masterson designed it. It's a beautiful little book that's out of print, but the poems are collected, many of them in My Body, New and Selected Poems. So, those poems were written in the mid 1990s, and it was published in, I think, 97. And, our community was devastated by, people that who I loved were dying like crazy. And so a lot of that book is elegiac, and that was deliberate. I wanted to write, I had this grandiose idea that I wanted to write an oratorio about AIDS, but I ended up, writing a 2-page poem instead, and then more of the poems that are in that book. And then during all of that, while my friends were dying, my mother was also dying. So, so there is a lot of death and dying in that poem, but I don't think it's grim. I just, I wanted to lift up those people that we had lost,
But it's also, I'm hearing it in this, so it's like I don't think of the dead as being necessarily, they kind of visit. And so that's what the sense I'm getting in there. Like in the poems you just read, these like visitations.
Oh, I'm so glad you said that. I've been thinking about that all day today. And I went back to, because, there are people who've died more recently who I just feel are with me. And, people often in a Q&A, fortunately not in this one, say, who do you think of, who are you writing for? And do you think about your audience? That's one of the classic poetry reading questions. And so I thought about, I never think about other people while I'm writing, but I was looking back at that fragment from Keats where he begins, this living hand, now warm and capable of earnest grasping, and he ends, see, here it is, I hold it towards you. And these may be the words in the poem, or maybe that was written as part of a play. People don't really know, but maybe he was just talking to Fanny Braun, his unrequited love. But I feel like it's Keats reaching out across the border between life and death towards us, and he's alive for me in that moment. And there's an incredible short Muriel Rukeyser poem that I think it's called Then, and she says, when I'm dead, even then I'll still be, I can't quote it exactly, I'll still be making poems for you. It is building music, and I'll still be making poems for you out of silence. And I feel she's with me, and Keats is with me, that 24-year-old genius, that we lost. Anyway, maybe that's a good place to
Maybe, yeah.
stop.
And I think Terrence thinks so too.
Did we go over?
Yeah, that was, thank you so much.